Welcome to Beyond a Thought and welcome to the interview series. In this interview, I'll be chatting to Janelle Da Silva, a multi-hyphenated artist right here in Naarm, also known as Melbourne. I found her when I was casting for my graduating film at the Victorian College of the Arts back in 2018. It was a monologue she wrote and performed on YouTube that made me instantly want her for a role in my short film. Janelle has had great on-screen performances and stage shows, but what really made me want to have this chat with her was her TEDx talk she did in April last year, titled Pay the Rent. The team at TEDx invited her to do a talk after her successful fundraising campaign called Run Bitch Run, named after her YouTube monologue. Her campaign raised thousands of dollars for the Kathy Freeman Foundation, which supports education opportunities for Indigenous children living in remote communities. I want to hear more of her thoughts on what it's like running on stolen land and other ways that we can help pay the rent. Once again, I'll be breaking this down into shorter themed segments so it's easy to consume. Now let's begin. All right, I just want to start with an acknowledgement of country. I acknowledge and pay respect to the Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation and the traditional custodians and original storytellers of the land on which Beyond a Thought is made. I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. I also pay my respects to the matriarchs who have and continue to bear the brunt of colonisation. Sovereignty was never ceded, so this was and always will be Aboriginal land. Oh, Janelle,
Indeed.
how are you? Thank
Hello.
you so much for sitting down and chatting to me.
It's my pleasure, and I would like to acknowledge that I'm on Wadawurrung country, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, Corinna Eccles and her family. There's 5 generations living on country, which is amazing, considering they're the only bloodline left of the Wadawurrung people. And it's my honour and humble privilege to be here on Wadawurrung country with you today.
Thank you. I just wanted to start off by saying, how was your Corona experience last year? Do you have any hobbies that you have taken from 2020 and your Corona lifetime? Lockdown?
Yeah, my hair is my hobby. After the shitstorm that was, as an artist, as an independent decolonizing artist, losing my work in March. It was so big, and then the world went mad, and then George Floyd was murdered, and at that point it was like that was the point that I decided to get a rainbow unicorn mane, mohawk, and because I thought, if the world is having problems seeing colour, I'm just going to bring more colour to it.
Yeah. Wow.
But this was a part of honouring my inner child, because last year was about self-care and coming back to basics about what keeps me well: eating, sleeping, drinking water, fresh air, moving the body, and loving my loved ones. So keeping it really real was probably last year's hobbies, and that just included slowing down, making a veggie garden. I had the privilege of doing that, and and then dyeing my hair.
There's some really great points there that you just pointed out or brought to light. It's like the last part you said was slow down, and that's something I've noticed from last year as well. Just living slower. You know what I mean? Like, I just sort of stopped all my I wouldn't say stop, but just all the aspirations and career goals I wanted as an artist. I just stopped and just said, you know what? I'm just going to focus on myself right now and not be too fussed and worried, So my partner, who's an actor, I just slowed down how I was living and being like, you know what? Why worry right now about not becoming a filmmaker if no one's going to become a filmmaker right now? No one can do anything. Just go back to basics,
Mm,
you know?
mm.
And there's another point you said how, you know, with Black Lives Matter, do you feel that there was like two sides to humanity? Do you feel there was like looking at oneself as in you looking at yourself and then looking at humanity as a whole? Do you think that was that really hit a lot of people? Like, it was, does that make sense? Like
Yeah,
people
yeah,
started
yeah.
looking at themselves more from last year.
Well, I suppose if we localize it, so um, if we look at Australian people who are, you know, middle class and also and have access to um, social media and the internet, access to technology, um, you know, which is where I sort of fall in. I feel like all we had was, you know, digital technology to connect with each other. And so I think there was a very, you know, it was very confronting. I think there was a big shift between the haves and the have-nots globally. And I think with that came, you know, I live, as I said, in Torquay, and a lot of people were just on holiday. Like a lot of people are in a position where, yes, they were inconvenienced or working from home and managing kids, but they had a roof over their head. We live by the ocean. You know, there's still food, even though people went bananas and, you know, emptied the supermarkets and all that crazy stuff. Yeah, I do feel there was a big split between, you know, um, access to privilege and communication was a big part of that. And then that ability to actually self-reflect, because I think we were all kicked into survival mode. You know, we were all, everyone, no matter how privileged we are, it sort of came down to what's our mental health like, what's our physical health like, you know, um, how do we receive intimacy when we can't be near each other? You know, how do we exist? How do we thrive? Or how do we do this as humans when everything we have taken for granted is not really accessible or is constricted? So yeah, look, I think, I don't know, I guess I look at the world consistently as an intersectional person. So there's lots of identities that make me up. And one of those things is I'm a mother. So, you know, I'm an artist and I'm a partner and, you know, I'm all these sort of things, but I'm also healthy. I'm also living in a white middle class suburb where, you know, we didn't have the 5K radius, but I've got the ocean right there. So that, you know, I really felt for all of my my colleagues and my people in Melbourne who, you know, totally different existence, totally different day to day. Even down the peninsula, well, in the Mornington Peninsula, where people were still in that Melbourne ring of steel or whatever. Yeah, wow, how challenging. And yeah, and I did some studies online, and a lot of my fellow students were in other states around the country, and they were just like, yeah, you know, like life was just normal for them. And we were, you know, in masks, and all the Melbourne students or the Victorian students. And yeah, so it was a big contrast last year, a really big polarizing of access, I would say. And so, yes, I think some of us got the chance to navel gaze a lot. And some of us were just like, you know, I just need to actually find a way to live through today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's going to be a big difference in society with those who went through more of a lockdown than others, like you just said. Like, for example, in living in Naarm, how we had like 3 months of lockdown. So maybe, I don't know, there'll be different stories brought to light
Yeah.
in the next year or so.
Yes.
And segueing from stories, I only came across your TED Talk when you posted it recently. So I'm a year late, but it's the reason why I really wanted to talk to you. So I apologize for finding it so late in life, but it really spoke to me in certain ways. And I just want to firstly ask, can you tell us what brought you to the TEDx stage? How you had that opportunity?
Yeah, it was a invitation. In December 2019, I received an invitation just before Christmas. And that freaked me out because, you know, it was for March and no, it was for February. And I was like, I don't have a talk ready. I don't know what to say. And the invitation was essentially, the organizers had seen my spoken word piece, Run Bitch Run. And they just said, we would like for you, or would you like some time to say something? And I thought, yeah, I've got heaps to say, but I thought I'm not actually ready for the TED stage. And it was a really big, a big process as a mid-career artist to kind of go, okay, Janelle, pull your socks up, let's go. We've got 2 months, let's do this. And in typical me fashion, you know, it didn't sort of formulate until maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the time. But there was so much going on. I was like, I've been building my racial literacy vocabulary, and I didn't think that I was ready to just kind of put myself on such a platform. However, I did it. So, you know, and when I watch it now, I'm like, cringing. But, you know, that's what happens, you know, as you know, in the industry, you kind of just have to sort of swallow and celebrate where you were at the time.
Yeah.
And acknowledge you did what you did with what you had. And that's what happened on the day.
Yeah. It was 17.
Having said that, it was an incredible experience. I mean, to context, TED, to be a TED speaker has been up there with winning an Oscar for me.
You won an Oscar?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
It's on the way.
It's
a goal.
Yeah.
It was a goal.
There's TED Talk, and then there's Oscar. So it's next. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was quite confronting to be invited, because I had to move through that whole, why me? You know, there's so many other people who've got so much more to say, blah, 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 all that stuff. And then kind of going, actually, Janelle, just do what you do. Just say the way you say it, and people will take or leave it.
Yeah. That's incredible, isn't it? It's like that. I hear that a lot with artists, even myself, like when you get recognition or asked to do something quite big and noble, it's like you often have this like imposter or gremlin. You're like, I'm not good enough. Why would you want me? Like, there's so many better people out there than me. Like, you know, and you get this sort of guilt and shame. So that's it. Yeah. It's incredible that you just got to fight through that and realize there's a reason why they asked you, and you must be good enough. You know, you must have a story to tell. So.
Sure. Yeah. And everyone does. I mean, the truth is everyone does have an incredible story to tell. It's just, we lack so many inclusive spaces that invite people not only to be seen or have access to these spaces, but to be heard in these spaces, without the white gatekeeping gaze that, that kind of that censors and shifts focus of what often the real story is. So the TED Talk was a huge milestone for 2020 for me. Yeah, in life, but for 2020.
Yeah, no, completely for that year. Yeah, and did anything anything great come out of that? I mean, like anything in general, like good conversations, or spoke to, I guess, important people that really were moved by it.
Yeah, look, on the actual, you know what it's like when you have a live experience. When it's filmed, it's never quite the same. The live experience was incredible, and yeah, I was humbled to be one of the 2 speakers. There was about 10 speakers in the day, or 12 speakers, and I was one of 2 of another speaker, myself and another woman. We received standing ovations, and yeah, it was really humbling to receive that, because then people throughout the day would come up and talk to me and be very open about their own experiences of what it feels like to be a non-Indigenous Australian, what it feels like to experience racism, what it feels like to live with privilege, what it feels like to feel ignorant to things that they feel like they should be more aware of. Yeah, it was really, people let down their guard, and it was incredibly connecting. And I've found that ever since. Anyone who does see the talk and chooses to communicate with me often will say, thank you, just thank you, and this is my experience. And that sort of happened, yeah, randomly, like lots of random things, emails from Holland and Canada and India, and just, yeah, random people and groups, which is incredible. And that was the reason why I was so nervous about the TED Talks, because I knew that was a global platform.
Wow. Yeah.
Even though I was talking about something very local, you know, I was talking about Australia and being Australian, but you know, there was also that part of me going, well, I have to speak about what I know. I can't, yeah, I can't talk to anything other than that. So yeah, that so far,
that's really,
conversation.
Yeah, and that's really incredible. Like you said, it's like not pandering to what you think the audience wants, but like speaking for what you want, for what you I don't know how to phrase it, but like speaking for yourself rather than speaking for others. You know, that's obviously what connects. I feel like helps people connect. Yeah. So and I guess on that note, you mentioned something which is running. So running's a huge passion of yours, and that was what inspired Run Bitch Run and inspired the TED Talk. And so I guess, can you tell me what it is you believe has always driven this passion for running, and your whole life? What's made you really enjoy running? And
well, I'm blessed. I guess I have to give shout out to my ancestors, really. I have to give props to my ancestors, because I come from a lineage of people who were, lots of lineages of people who essentially were nomadic for either environmental or survival or cultural reasons. So I'm multi-generational mixed race person. So I've got a lot of heritages of people that have moved all over the globe, each generation, in order to survive. So that whole sort of that whole idea of momentum to thrive is a part of who I am. And of course, I was never aware of that, but just as a child, it was just so much fun to play and run. And but when I look back as a mature age woman, I know that what running has always done is it's connected me to my breath, and it's connected me to my body, and that being multi-generational mixed race non-Indigenous Australian person, first Australian of immigrant families. So essentially, I've never felt like I've had a place of home outside of my body, and running is like an unconscious, it has been unconscious, but now it's much more conscious, sort of moving meditation to come home to my body. Yeah, so it's never been about winning or yeah, I mean, getting fit is incredible. I mean, running is hard work. Like, it's not fun as such. It's, I find it interesting, the dialogue that comes up, like, all of the demons that tell you all of the things that we always, shy away from, or we self-medicate from, or we create really comfortable lives so we don't have to deal with our critical selves so much. But when you run, as soon as you run, like, all that just drops, and like, stop, why are you running? You're not fit enough, you're tired, you can't breathe well, just stop, it hurts, it's cold, you're hot, all these things just dip, constantly sort of happening. And I enjoy the mental challenge of coming back to presence, coming back to the breath, coming back to my body, coming back to the environment around me, and choosing a more useful thought pattern in that moment.
Wow. That's so interesting. I was wondering, I mean, you went through so many layers, and I was wondering if there was a symbolic significance to it. And yeah, you really brought it to light. Yeah. And from there, I guess, for a few years now, you've been running with Cathy Freeman and her foundation. Like, when I first saw that, it was like, it was like a little fanboy moment, I was like, wow, Cathy Freeman, holy crap, and yeah, and it's just like, so what really, tell me what her foundation's about, and what's the relationship you've gained from Cathy, or knowing Cathy.
Yeah, okay, so essentially, the journey of writing the spoken word piece was just essentially choosing to take my running to the next level, which was, I chose to run marathons about 5-6 years ago, because that was like, that's another bucket list sort of thing, with TED speaker and Oscar winner. Marathon runner runner marathon was on the thing, not marathon runner, because I had no idea what it would take to be a marathon runner. But essentially, I endured a racist experience when I was younger, and when I signed up to join the marathon, I remembered that the racist experience as a young person, was about being called Cathy Freeman. I was chased by two teenagers. I was a teenager myself, and as a racist taunt, they were calling me Cathy Freeman. In my mind, I was like, that is the best diss you could ever give me, but they were chasing me, so I was, I was running for safety. But that's where I developed that spoken word poem, and I chose to, without invitation, I chose to just use the poem as a fundraiser for that first marathon. And the poem took on a life of its own, and I ended up raising 12.5 grand for that run, and that made me the highest individual fundraiser that year, and that's how I met Catherine, and I got to watch my spoken word clip with Catherine, because she didn't know about the poem. And that's probably one of the highlights of my life, was doing that with my family, my kids and my husband, watching that poem with Catherine, because in the poem, in the story, I essentially say that I've experienced racism, but I'm not an Aboriginal person, and I'm running because the Cathy Freeman Foundation supports 4 remote Indigenous communities in Queensland and Northern Territory, One of them is Bulkaman. The colonizer name is Palm Island. Bulkaman is where Catherine's from, up in Queensland, and there's about 1,600 kids in these communities, and the Cathy Freeman Foundation supports these kids and their families to keep the kids in school from prep to year 12, and provides programs to assist them in understanding the importance of education and how it can provide opportunities for them to realise their goals and their potential. And I am very passionate about education myself, and I feel a responsibility because my family was able to immigrate here, and I'm able to provide my children free education, a public education easily. And our First Peoples kids don't have that kind of access in remote community, and I don't feel okay about that. And I'm just one mum, this independent artist living out regionally. But I just felt like if I can make my running make a difference just by raising money and telling people about my story, or my experience, and that can put money into the foundation for these kids, and to me that's paying the rent. For me that's paying the rent of being a non-Indigenous Australian living on unceded country, because I feel guilty and I feel shame that I have been entitled to all of these benefits that I don't even think about, but essentially have provided me with inroads that I know Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been fighting for 230 plus years. So I've just kept running, and I've created teams out of different events, and so I'm encouraging people just to move. So we have lots of different teams for different events, and I'm 10 marathons in, and I don't know how many events in total. I don't know how many team members we've had over the years, but we've raised just over 50 grand. And I know that that's a speck in the ocean of what corporates could give, but I'm proud that I've been able to do that. To me, I do feel like that is paying the rent. Of course, money will never be enough, but my commitment to being a lifelong ally is, and my commitment to educating myself, and I've chosen to do that through running. So, and Catherine, she's, we all adore her, and as a nation, and she has this, she didn't ask for all of this sort of political loading of her identity and all of the things that she brings. She just wanted to run, and yet now she knows, she has a responsibility to lead others. And so I don't think we have a problem. I don't think we have an Aboriginal problem. I think we have a non-Indigenous Australian problem. Mm-hmm. It's not. I think we are the problem. And when we talk about closing the gap, I think the gap is between non-Indigenous Australians not being educated enough. And we think Aboriginal people are, they've got this and this and that going on. Well, I think it's because of the way that we have colonized this country and not acknowledged them in treaty, and like basic things, like asking, everything's unceded here, so everything's stolen, there's no treaty, really basic shit that we just did not do. We are the problem, and I think it's our work it's part of our unearned privilege that if we're going to benefit off this system that keeps oppressing Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people and their kids, the least we can do is work out how we can dismantle, how we as an individual can dismantle whatever access we have to what upholds this oppressive system, and share, just put it on the table and have uncomfortable conversations with people, you know, like just start to break down these ideas that there's nothing we can do. And, you know, the government throws money at them, you know, just all this really twisted stuff that seems, I know you asked me a very small question, but I know I'm going really far.
This is where we need to go, yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of the crux of why I run, because I run on country. I run on land I wasn't invited on, that I was born on, that I'm entitled to, you know, earn money, put down a mortgage and say it's mine on a piece of paper. Like, it's crazy. And yet there's, you know, 5 generations of Wadawurrung, of a one Wadawurrung family out of a whole mob of people. You know, they live like 3-4 blocks up the road, and it's their country. Yeah. And on top of that, Corinna's great grandmother was Queen Mary. So the Wadawurrung mob are royalty.
Wow.
You know, we talk about we live under a monarchy. You know, I've got a monarchy here on country. I've got my queen and their family just a couple blocks up the road. Yeah, wow. And you know, that means something to me. Yeah.
There's so many layers. I'm just trying to pick at what you've just said.
Sorry.
No. This is great. This is where I love going. Yeah, this sort of like that's so fascinating, because you hear these sort of stereotypes, or these like these phrases that people say, and where they're like, you know, I'm gonna put a voice on just for comedic value, but you know, they'll say like, oh yeah, all these people protesting on Invasion Day, do they even care about the rural communities? You know, it's like, hang on, but like, have you even been to a protest on Invasion Day? Have you even heard what people like Lydia Thorpe are saying on Invasion Day, and our First Nation people are saying? Because when they say, we need to get out there and help the rural communities with education and whatnot, like you just said, we need to help educate non-Indigenous people. That's so integral. And, you know, after watching You Can't Ask That on ABC, and another great video on YouTube called You Can Ask Us Anything, and then reading like Stan Grant Talking to Country, and reading the best book, Dark Emu, you find that they've said the same thing, where it's the problems we have in these communities have come from colonization, you know, have come from systematic racism, you know, and white supremacy. So then for non-Indigenous people to say, we need to go in there and clean it up, we created it, you know? So it's like, it's insane, you know? And I'm, as a non-Indigenous person, I'm not going to speak on what, you know, we can do, but it's like, it's so much better hearing from Indigenous people on how, you know, they want to work on their own community, you know? It's like, yeah. And, you know, Stan Grant, like going out in these communities, and some like Indigenous people saying, we're rebelling. Like Indigenous people saying, we don't want to work for your system. We don't want to, you know, support your way of life. And it's like, of course, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, there's so many layers to it, you know?
There is. And I've definitely, I can think of like a few different marathons I ran, or long trail distances that I ran, where at different parts of the run where it was really, really hard, and I was you know, you meet your edges when you do any endurance sport, or anything, you know, that's difficult. There was times I remember going, what the hell am I doing? You know, why am I doing this? What does it matter? You know, why would white fella education make a difference for black fellas anyway? Like, who am I to say, yeah, all kids should get a white fella education? And, you know, I've had to work that through, like because obviously I'm looking for motivation to keep running to finish the race. But, you know, there was a time about, I don't know, a couple of years ago where I was like, actually, I need to go to a community and actually go there and see what happens, and just, you know, volunteer for the Kathy Freeman Foundation while I'm there and see whether I am making a difference or whether I'm tripping, whether I'm just being, you know, like a white savior. Like, what the fuck? Excuse me, I don't know whether, can I swear?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Right, cool. Anyway, and so I've had to work through my my own socialization into white supremacy. I've had to look at my own unconscious bias. I've had to examine and check my own privilege. And in that process, I've had to understand that, okay, I'm not this ambassador for white fella education, but I stand with Catherine in saying that where the country is at right now, education will change lives. Education will provide opportunity for black fella kids to walk in both worlds. I understand why kids in remote community would not want to go to school. You know, English might be their sixth language. It might be that they actually weren't able to sleep that night because they had a lot going on at home, and there might not even been a place to sleep because everyone was, you know, the whole mob could be sleeping on the floor and in the house, and just stuff going on all the time. You know, there's a lot going on in communities because of our neglect and because of our abuse, oppression and abuse, and yet, if education can be a tool for these kids to find a way to advocate and create more self-determined opportunities for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, then I'm behind it 100%, and that's what keeps me still a part of fundraising for the foundation. And just to be clear, the foundation, like, I'm not affiliated with the foundation. I'm a volunteer by choice. They didn't ask me, and in fact, I thought it was interesting when I started with my Run Bitch Run campaign, they were actually a little bit distant, like they were sort of distancing themselves from me because they didn't watch the spoken word. They just knew that all of a sudden all this money was coming in from this Run Bitch Run campaign, and it sounded offensive, and and it wasn't really kind of the marketing that they wanted to have.
Yeah.
But I also clocked that there was a white team, like a big non-Indigenous team at the time. So yeah, when I met Catherine, that's why she didn't know about my poem or anything like that, because she was sort of protected to a degree.
That brings other. Sorry to interrupt.
Go.
That brings other questions or statements, I guess. Where, firstly, like, do you think it's important to have someone like Kathy or anyone Indigenous at the front of education for Indigenous people? Like, you know, this is going to sound, you know, it's going to sound hilarious, but do you think it's more important having someone like Kathy Freeman running or helping education for young Indigenous children than someone like Tony Abbott, who is, you know, as Indigenous affairs. You know what I mean? Having someone
Yeah.
as Indigenous rather than having a white person, rather than having a non-Indigenous person, because
I think yeah, like if we can flip it a little bit, my observation is that we're to hand over access to decision making. While we have a Liberal government, that's never going to happen. I can't say this. I don't know about a Labor government either. You know, we're very, you know, we're very much to the right. It'll be interesting to see after. I don't know whether Joe Biden's going to be able to do anything. I mean, he's, you know, but the point, you know, globally, we're at a very polarized place when it comes to racial social justice issues and racial relations. It's all pretty fucked right now. I mean, it's never really been good, but yeah, I'm not Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, so I can't speak of what would be better.
No, that's I guess that's my fault too, because something I've learned, like after January 26th, I started having people saying to me, you know, oh, when do you think we should have the date? I'm like, I'm not going to answer that. Like,
yeah,
there was so many non-Indigenous people discussing when they think we should have the date, or if the date should be changed or abolished. It's like I just learnt. I just had this moment where I'm like, wait, this is not a discussion for me. This is not a discussion for me and another non-Indigenous person. So I just said, I'm not going to comment on the issue. You know, I think we should abolish, you know, Australia Day, but I'm not going to say when we should celebrate or if we should celebrate and, you know, Australia Day or so-called Australia Day. So I think, yeah, that's so important, not speaking for Indigenous people. And I guess that brings me to the next sort of question, which is like, being an ally, you know, like you said, it's like the fact that they could have a you know, a white group, a group of white people running for Cathy Freeman, but not speaking for the Cathy Freeman Foundation. It's like, I assume they wanted people like someone like Cathy leading it, but anyone could be involved. You didn't have to be Indigenous to be involved in it, you know.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And I think, you know, I mean, I talk about this in my TED talk, and I think that this is obviously quintessential in our culture, is that sport is the equalizer. You know, sport is something that every Australian should love. Like every household should love sport. And that's just, you know, that is colonial as fuck. But everybody loves to move their body. Everyone loves to play. And if, far out, I mean, it is really layered, Jason. I don't, you know, it's hard to sort of, it's hard to bring it down into small things, into small points, but Australian culture has only allowed Aboriginal people to have access to mainstream culture via sport. You know, only in the past 3 or 4 decades have we said, sure, you can entertain us as well. And we've allowed, you know, a certain amount of Aboriginal actors and creators to have mainstream. But when it comes to sport, it's like, oh, if you can represent our country, sure, you know. And so, like, the pressure, I can't even imagine what the pressure would be like on any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander athlete to represent their people and their struggle, regardless whether they wanted to or not. But that is, you know, that's what they bring. And, you know, we're dealing with it today with, you know, Collingwood being outed for their I don't really even want to go there, but my point is that decentering whiteness, decolonizing our culture and our systems to me is really my focus. So creating spaces that are decolonized, which means shifting that white gaze. So not centering whiteness as a culture, not as a color, but as a culture, is where I know I can do that. I can affect change as an ally.
No, that's yeah.
But but sort of exercising is something everyone can do. And yeah, I had my biggest teams last year after George Floyd was murdered. There was an incredible amount of white people donating and contributing and joining the team, and it was a good thing, you know, as much as it's a painful thing for all of us who live with the experience of oppression and racism. Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, okay, all right, it took a pandemic, but here you are. That's good. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's yeah, it's sort of like from reading Stan Grant and his relationship with Adam Goodes and whatnot, saying how it's okay if you know, we play your sport, but as long as we don't speak up, you know. And I was like,
yeah,
that's full on, like, you know, and it's true. It's like once oh damn, I forgot his name. That's really embarrassing. But he was the captain of North Cowboys, and he won a premiership.
I don't know NFL.
Oh, there you go. Well, anyway, it's like we celebrate the ones who play the sport really well, you know, and you know, kick goals and win premierships and whatnot. But as soon as the ones who speak up, or the ones that kneel at the national anthem or don't participate in it, then, you know, so many white Australians will scrutinise them. And it's like this whole thing of like, you know, like you said, it's like, you know, participate but don't make it political, because for some reason being against racism is political. I've always found that fascinating. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we could speak about our prime minister saying we shouldn't make it political. What's it got to do with politics? You know?
Like Peter Norman. I mean, we could. Yeah. Have you about Peter Norman in 1968?
You know, and it's like and there we go. It's like the fact that Peter Norman stood by John Carlos and sorry, I've forgotten the other man.
Tommy Smith.
Thank you, Tommy Smith. And he was scrutinised when he came back. You know. Oh,
he lost his access, really. Oh. He was a butcher for the rest of his life. He couldn't.
Wow.
He couldn't represent the country again.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
For his career, it is a shame. It is the truth of how racist we are as a country. If it took 50 years posthumously for Peter Norman to be acknowledged for what he did, and I mean, but that is the age-old, you know, white supremacist argument, is that, you know, is that someone acknowledging their struggle or using their platform to represent who they are is politicizing. And I can't speak to it. It frustrates. I'm still developing my racial literacy vocabulary around how to even talk about it, to be honest.
But here's the thing. It's like, you know, we just spoke about Peter Norman and all the years ago that was, with like 1960s, I think it was.
And it's 68, yeah.
68, there you go. And you know, I haven't seen the Kathy Freeman documentary yet, so that's on my shame list. But
yeah,
I watched a quick Gogglebox episode of people watching it, and I hate that show. But anyway, I watched it anyway. But it was really interesting because like all these non-Indigenous people were like, oh, I can't believe we did that to Kathy. You know, when, you know, she had the Aboriginal flag tied around her neck and Australia was just said she shouldn't have done that. And all these people watching us like, I can't believe we did that. That's just disgusting. You know, she's a national icon. But it's like to look at the past and say how, you know, like disgusting we acted back then, but like not everything, it hasn't changed. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And it's thinking of like,
Yep.
you know, it's like we did that back then and we're ashamed of it, but we've moved on. But then what happened to Adam Goodes happened. And it's like, have we moved on? Because,
No,
you
no,
know,
we've not.
so,
No, we've not at all. Yeah, and unfortunately, we have white gatekeepers at every turn of where the power is held. So dismantling the system means that we need white people or non-Indigenous people to be allies, because we need to talk to our people. We need to be the ones that are having these conversations that confronts essentially, if we're not anti-racism, we are complicit. And so we are upholding all of these systems that are creating the damage. And that's why I am living by this phrase, allyship is a verb, because it really, to me, it's like you really have to, you're either doing something or you're not. And if you're not, you're complicit. And if you're complicit, it's, you know, there's a Martin Luther King quote about, you know, I'm not going to even try and remember it, other than that the point of it is to do nothing is to do harm as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But I mean,
it's been really good for me to unpack, pulling my head out of my own ass of my own struggle, and actually checking my privilege in 2020 and 2021 and going, I've actually benefited from whiteness my whole life, and my family strove, you know, immigrated through countries and changed their names and changed their birthdays and changed their religions and changed all these things so I could be here now with a rainbow head, you know, in a second marriage, as a queer person, as an independent artist, blah, 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 living by the ocean. I've got so much opportunity that that 2 generations ago would be, you know, a pipe dream, like the wildest fantasy my popo, which is Chinese for grandma, could ever dream, you know, in the most core essence. I'm living that. And with that comes responsibility, which is that I'm actually benefiting from a country that is still oppressing the Indigenous people here at the cost of my benefit.
Yeah. And you spoke about that in your TEDx talk, and coming to the realization of discovering your whiteness. Yeah, and I found that so fascinating because, like you said, it's like we need to do the work, you know, and that's something I've discovered last year. It's like I said to my partner, I said, you know, the reason why I don't know more about our First Nations people is because my education in school was lacking. You know, we learn about, you know, the First Fleet and Captain Cook and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, that's just an excuse. And I'm like, no, it's true. Like, we didn't have Indigenous studies. I'm like, yeah, but you're using that as an excuse to not know more. She's like, now that you know that, now you have to go out and do the work yourself. You know? And I was like, you know, it's firstly, you know, yes, I was right. I don't know enough because of my schooling wouldn't teach Indigenous studies, but now it's my job to go out and learn. Now it's my job to go out and read. You know, now it's my job to listen to their stories, you know, online, or like follow Indigenous companies and whatnot. So it's like, going back on, what happened to Adams, it's like we had all these white people or non-Indigenous people on TV saying if it was or wasn't racism. And I was like, I watched NITV talk about the issue, and I got more from watching NITV talk about it with Nikki Winmar than I did from any white or not white or non-Indigenous person saying, no, it's not racism because of this, or yes, it was racism because of this. It's like, why are we deciding what is and what isn't racism? Like, NITV was like, yeah, of course it was. We've been dealing with that for years. You think that's new?
Mm-hmm.
I was dealing with it, back in '98 or whatever it was. So it's like, bam, like if we're, like going straight to the source and having, Indigenous people educating us is, the Australian of the Year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Senior.
Yeah.
Dr. Miriam Rose.
Oh my God. Like what she said, she's like, now that I have done the work and my people have done the work of learning your culture, it's now your turn to learn my culture. And I was like, wow, that's incredible, So yeah. Anyway, sorry, that was a massive tangent, but I think it's so important that we start, doing the work for ourselves rather than relying on our government to do it for us,
Yeah. Well, when I think of whiteness as a culture, like when I say whiteness, I'm talking about the overarching mainstream culture, which is born or based on colonialism. And I see racism as like a grandchild of colonialism. Like it was created, the idea of race was created so that people could be used for benefit and gain. Bodies could be bought and sold, and they needed to be disassociated from humanity and created into commodities in order for the whole idea of colonization to prosper. So all of a sudden race is created, and so racism just perpetuates all of these colonial constructs, which are white supremacist ideals. And so when I talk about whiteness as a culture, part of it's like fish swimming in an ocean and they're wondering what water feels like. That's like white people trying to work out what racism is. It's like we're swimming in it. It's everywhere. Everything is racist. If you understand that the default is racist, then it's easier to sort of question whether you are complicit to that default, like whether you are contributing and you agree with it, or whether you can kind of look at it and go, okay, so if it means I've got to do my research, if I've got to do the work, have I been raised with the assumption that everything is entitled to me, that I should be given everything, and that knowledge, whatever has been deemed knowledge and information, is right? History is written by all of the colonizers, by the winners, and the winners were the ones that killed, mass genocide of races. So as soon as you start to unpack the mechanics of socialization, where it's like we're all swimming in this massive pond of whiteness, that's how I realized, oh my God, I've been operating like a white woman for 40 years. Because even though I'd had individualized experiences of racism, I've internalized the culture so deeply that I've erased my own culture. I've erased my own color. I've erased my ability to advocate and to speak as a person of color. As an actor, I've had to play white roles written by white people for white audiences. I didn't even know what it was like to be a person of color in those spaces. I had to be fetishized and stereotyped and exotified in order to get my roles, because that's the way that whiteness was allowing me to infiltrate or be present in a white dominated society. So decolonization is a really important part, I find, of it's a bit of a matrix thing. It's just like keeping it real. It's kind of going, okay, the more I do my history about how these laws that I live by, how these social classes that I slot into, it's everything and it's everywhere. And it really is a bit of a Pandora's box. I feel as soon as you open the lid, everything, it doesn't stop. Mm-hmm. There's no end to understanding how you can catch unconscious bias and internalized racism, because we are all socialized under this same culture. And then people of color internalize it, and we erase our own identities in order to assimilate. Mm-hmm. Assimilation was legalized. It was a part of the colonial system, but colonization is so intelligent as a system that now we just do it to ourselves. And now Australians are so entrenched and loyal and patriotic to our culture, which unfortunately is white supremacist, that we will bag each other out if we speak against racism. Like what with Adam happened. We've got idiots like Eddie Maguire with so much access to power, but he's just downright racist. Like, there is no other way to see that man. And Scott Morrison is the same. So we've got so far to go, so very, very far to go.
And you really just those sort of last points. It's like the white man not wanting to hand over his power. And like that's something that's on the Liberals, and especially Scott Morrison. It's like we need to, I need to like step down. Here's a film. I saw a film that just come out called, you've probably already heard of it, High Ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw it with a Q&A with the director and producer. I was so extremely excited to see this film. It's a white savior film.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I so thought, please don't be that. And yeah.
And it really,
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, like, I've already ruined it for you, obviously.
No. But, of course it was going to be, but
Yeah. But
I know we've got so far to go.
Janelle, here's the thing. It's like, it's written by a white guy, and it's directed by a white guy, and when I was at the Q&A, I was like, okay, because I looked them both up. I'm like, okay, the writer wrote Wogboy and other the Greek films, because he's from Greece originally, and the director, I'm like, okay, I want to hear from the director. I want to hear why he directed this film, because we got Warwick Thornton, we've got Tony Briggs, we've got First Nations people that could direct this film. I want to hear why he directed it. Anyway, so the first question from the person that hosted the Q&A, he said, what made you wanted to make this film? I'm like, I knew that question was going to come up. And he said, growing up, I grew up in Africa. I grew up in the Bahamas, and I grew up in Darwin. And I just knew these communities in Darwin. And when I was telling my partner, she's like, oh, so he had black friends. I'm like, oh, of course. That's basically what he said. He said, I have many friends who are Indigenous. So I thought, I can write this story.
Yeah.
But, and then there's like, Black Panther wouldn't be Black Panther without Ryan Coogler. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just like that thing of like, what am I trying to say? Oh, yes. It's like understanding that I need to step down and that I will never experience racism because white people can't experience racism, you know? So and there's this YouTube comedian who like did a video against Invasion Day, and he's just like, because you can be racist against white people too. I'm like, no, you can't. And we can go into the definition, but we don't need to. But it's just that thing of like understanding that we need to step down, and hand over the platform. That's
hand over the keys.
hand
Over the mic, hand over the camera, hand over the power.
I guess. Oh, sorry. I was just trying to figure out. I was trying to get to the point of: do you think it's harder for white people to do that than it is for people of color, because people of color have experienced racism?
I don't know. I can only speak for myself, because, like I said, as a multi-generational mixed race person, assimilation runs deep in my conditioning. So my default is to assimilate into the dominant culture for survival. And whenever I talk to, Indian people or Asian people about racism, I find that they will often say things that are entrenched in whiteness, like, let's not be divisive. Why should we talk about the problem? Let's focus on the solution. Like, there's so many deeply entrenched tropes that assimilated people of color take on, which essentially perpetuates internalized racism, which keeps us as enablers for white supremacy to prevail all the time. So I don't think it would matter whether you had, I just think, if you're telling a story, tell your story. And, I'm studying Aboriginal studies and doing a grad cert in it. And I just did Aboriginal people in the media, and we talked about collaboration, and we had lots of different people come to speak to us. And one of them was David Batty, who is a white fella who co-created Black As and Bush Mechanic, and he's created fantastic collaborations. And he is humble, like he's a humbled white fella, and he did collaboration well. But more often than not, all of the Aboriginal guest speakers that we had on, Mitch Torres and Mugabella Books, and they were all talking about how badly white people and non-Indigenous people do it, with how badly we collaborate, because it's harmful. Essentially, it's often re-traumatizing, because it's just the same colonizing premise that everyone uses, which is that we have as if we feel like we have a right to take without credit. Or there's this assumption that because what's his name, the dude who did 10 Canoes, there's a really good documentary of the making of that film called I've gone blanking this moment, but his name's Rob. But anyway, there's just really basic. 10 Canoes, you remember like how acclaimed that was, and it won all of these awards. And but the white guy who made it, directed it, oh my goodness, I can't believe I forgot his name, just took all of the accolades. Took all of them. And the cultural safety, like the lack of cultural safety in the shooting of that film, the cultural knowledge that was given in the making of, it's really, you'd probably be interested as a director and a filmmaker, the way that he imposed upon the community his shooting schedule and his deadlines and his assumptions of how things needed to get done. Like, it was a really great and very difficult way to see how badly you can collaborate.
Rolf de Her.
Rolf de
Rolf de Her.
de Her.
De Her. Yeah, it doesn't sound indigenous to me. But I mean, you know, I can't say that.
No, he's not. No,
Yeah.
he's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it's called it's the cultural term for white fella. Anyway, I can't think of it right now. But anyway,
okay. I'll look at the documentary
of how 10 Canoes was made.
It sort of brings to the forefront how badly it was done.
It shows you. I mean, they don't make it like that. They just kind of show it as challenges, and you know, and then all of a sudden the magic happened, and you know, it's still through a white gaze.
Yes,
making this assumption that the black fella has to be grateful that we're giving him time and space, or that he owes it to us because we're bringing Hollywood to you. So. Yeah. You know, you've got to lay down and give me everything, and you've got to do it on my schedule and my budget. It's just a really bad way. Yeah, it's just a good thing to watch if you want to collaborate. And then if you look at Bush Mechanics or Black Az, have you seen any of those?
I've seen some Black Az. Black Az is hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah. So David Batty, he's talked to us about how he made those, you know, just shooting those series, and how on the fly it was, and then how in the editing suite he just had all of the mob in there, and you know, he had kids, you know, working out how to do all of the different roles. So he basically, community were just part of it. They made it. You know, the local musicians, all the mob made the music and recorded it. And so, I mean, that to me was really inspiring, because I was like, okay, if you come humbly and you come offering all of the access and the privileges that we have, you know, mob want to tell their story and they want to share it. And given the right protocol, cultural protocol, and given the right permission, and given the patience and the willingness, you can make something that this country is deeply requiring. You know, In My Blood It Runs is probably a really great way to start to look at how collaboration can go well. Yeah,
I really want to see that, but
so
that's it's so true, isn't it? You know, and that's what I sort of got from the Q&A as well. Like it was something about something about a room full of white people and non-Indigenous people that really threw me off guard when we were all talking about the importance of respecting culture. But then we had a film that was led by two non-Indigenous people, you know what I mean? And then, you know, like having Baz Luhrmann direct Australia and whatnot, you know, it's like the whole thing of like he's like, oh, we went out, we got all the original artifacts and we got all the original costumes, and you know, we're in the community, and like everyone from that town wanted to be a part of the film, but like, because they were just so excited to see themselves represented on the screen. But like, what would be better? Like getting them at the front of the script, getting them at the, you know, behind the camera. That's much more respectable than just being like, you know,
sure.
It really blew my mind. Anyway, so just talking about that, swim at Close the Gap and how we can help close the gap with that report that you brought up, you know, and I just want to know if you could talk a little further about the report Close the Gap, and, you know, other ways that we can be allies.
Gosh. Yeah, look, I think looking at where we get our news source from is probably a good start. When we talk about the Closing the Gap report, I mean, the mainstream media covers Indigenous affairs. You know, I don't even know whether Murdoch, you know, I mean, I just studied it last subject, but, you know, Murdoch reporters doing Indigenous affairs, you know, the amount of actual Indigenous reporters, let alone their editors, you know, and what actually gets airtime and gets print. And then you've got non-Indigenous journos reporting on things that they have no cultural understanding about. Our news is prejudice. So it's important that we look at alternative news sources and turn to, you know, the Koori Mail or just NITV, just start looking at Indigenous sources of news so that we can become more informed. That will help us to understand what these closing the gap issues are, you know, health and education and, you know, incarcerating kids as young as 10. The Cathy Freeman Foundation falls under, you know, how the education requirements that we're not hitting. And closing the gap is problematic in itself as a project for the government, because it's still entrenched in racism. Like it's still a Liberal government initiative. So, you know, there's just so many issues about closing the gap, and we always think, yeah, the gap is about, you know, where there's Aboriginal Australian people, and then there's everyone else, and it's always about bringing them up to us, you know. So that in itself is problematic.
Yeah.
Because that's not actually what's required, you know. Actually, it's this that's required. So, yeah, I don't really want to talk too much about the statistics, other than that I encourage everyone to go and Google it and do a little bit of research and see where the actual state of our nation is.
Yeah, cool. That really.
And then find Aboriginal news sources and start to incorporate that into your daily news sources, like Indigenous X on Twitter, and, you know, there's lots of different ways you can start to expand your intake.
That's such helpful advice, and I think that's really a good way to sort of bring this whole discussion to a close. It's like talking about how we can be supportive, and like I was saying before, it's like not like the government not bringing them to us, but bringing us to them, like you just said. It's like understanding what non-Indigenous people can do rather than what Indigenous people can do. That's what's most important, you know. Yeah. And that really that means a lot. It's like and there's this other thing that happens with the, you know, conservative, you know, media and like the Liberal government and whatnot, where they will find someone that looks at their view within the Indigenous community. Like, I don't know if you know Jacinda Price.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and like this happens obviously in America as well, where they'll be like, you know, oh, look at this Indigenous person, she agrees with us. So, you know, and then they'll just keep giving her platform space, you know. And it's
still a form, it's still a form of the trope of othering. So othering is embedded into our culture. And as long as we have non-Indigenous and Indigenous people, we're always going to be othering Aboriginal people. If we think of Aboriginal people as a group, that's like, you know, that's like looking at Europe and thinking an Italian represents Europe, right? Because there's like over, you know, 500 countries, Aboriginal countries in this land that we call Australia.
Mm-hmm.
There's over, you know, 800 languages. You can't just get one person and say, this person is Aboriginal, and so that they, you know, they represent every bloody black fella on this continent. That's just another form of racism. That's called othering, and that's what we perpetuate consistently in our media, And that's why we must stay vigilant. We must start to unpack how we are fed and how we are complicit to what we are absorbing and the way we are behaving every day.
Yeah, and that's that really means a lot, because it's just like oh God, what was I trying to sum up? That yes. After speaking to Justin, he said the same thing, which is like, you know, I do not speak for all Aboriginal people. I only speak for my country, my nation, you know, and like that just like was an eye-opening moment for me, because it's like he said, so often, you know, we'll get non-Indigenous people or white people come up to us and saying like, you know, oh, what's your take on, you know, or whole being Indigenous, and like, you know, what can we do? It's like, you know, it's, you look at the map of Australia as, you know, sorry, it's now Australia, but like all the countries, it's like Europe, you know, there's so many different nations, you know, so it's like to ask one person, like Jacinta Price, how can we, you know, and then she speaks for the whole, you know.
So again, that's just reinforcing and upholding white supremacy.
Yeah, no, totally.
That's all it is.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for sitting down and chatting. I really appreciate it. And like, that's the thing. It's like, I was contacting some other people to have a chat, and it's a sort of thing of like understanding that it must be hard knowing that you need to constantly have this conversation, you know? But,
yeah, it's, well, you know, yes, thank you for acknowledging that. And I'm at a point in my life where it's more painful to not acknowledge that, you know, that those intersections of a, you know, coming from Southeast Asian countries where my cultural upbringing is to be silent, you know, seen and not heard, and you know, submissive and all of these things, and acquiesce to, you know, the dominant culture. Yeah, I'm at a point now where I can see that letting things slide is not the easiest way out. Actually holding someone and staying connected as we go through the uncomfortable shit of accountability and responsibility is really the important, and allyship is something that, you know, I have a, you know, a white husband, so, you know, he has to do his work in order to live with me, and that is a choice for everyone who is a white passing person that benefits from whiteness. Is it's a choice to do the work or not, but your life, you know, firstly, it's a humane thing to do, and secondly, how boring to always be, you know, to always be the center of everything, you know. There's such a bigger world out there once you start to kind of stop being racist.
wow.
Whether you're conscious of it or not, you know. And if you take away this idea that the impact of racism means that you're a bad person, if you realize that you're just learning and you're committed to education and allyship, it means that it's okay. At times you are going to have people say to you, actually, that was really offensive. Would you be able to, you know, say it this way, or yeah. Can you just acknowledge that actually hurt when you said that? You know, we've got a long way to go to start to bring into our everyday colloquial language and dialogue of being accountable for our impact on each other's lives. Because we all are good intentioned. Everyone's good intentioned. Even those horrible racist people, you know, that love Pauline Hanson and all those people, they're all well-intentioned. They're just ignorant.
Mm.
You know, they're just so ignorant. They don't know any better. The only way that we can move forward is if we start to have uncomfortable conversations with each other.
Mm. Yeah.
And develop a robustness around I want to say more, it's more than allyship, but just around it's equity, but it's also visibility. It's also sort of providing that space for everyone to be in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
at the table.
Totally. And that's the like sort of thing. It's like when people, you know, say such things like, you know, oh, just because I enjoy Australia Day doesn't mean I'm racist. And then like coming to terms with like it's bigotry, you know, and like finding out what bigotry means and, you know, how it's so cemented in Australia culture, you know. And then, you know, and then seeing people sort of in the limelight, like you spoke about internalized racism, but like having someone like Morgan Freeman saying that, you know, you want to stop racism, stop talking about it. And it's like, and then you sort of, they put this seed. Yeah, I know, Janelle, I know. Like putting this seed into people and then they start saying, stop talking about it. It's like, no, that's exactly how you stop it. You talk about it. And, you know, I saw a great comeback, which is, you know how you stop cancer? Don't get cancer. You know? You're like, oh.
Don't talk about it and it will go away.
Hey, Janelle, do you want to not die? Don't die. Just don't die.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, no, that's not how things work, you know? You want to stop poverty? Don't get poverty. You know, it's like, no.
Yeah. Don't be poor.
Don't be poor. You know, like, it's such, once I heard, I'm like, of course, that's so bigotry. You know, it's like, you know, it's so ignorant. It's just ignorance, you know? So, yeah, it's having those tough conversations. That's what we all need to do.
Yeah. We've got to keep having those conversations. And I will, it's not easy being called out, but I mean, the idea, I suppose, is about being called in, you know, about being checked and, you know, that's something that I'm always open to and working with, even with my own circles of friends that are, you know, BIPOC, Black and Indigenous people of colour, and other intersections in the, you know, in the rainbow community as well, you know, where I'm always learning about how I can be more inclusive and always reprogramming.
Yeah, amazing. Great. I had something else to add, but I think I've forgotten, so it's all good.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank
you everyone else, if they're still with us.
Oh, they will be, trust me. I really appreciate you chatting to me, and thank you again for giving me this space and this conversation.
My pleasure.
Cheers, Janelle. Have an amazing day.
All right. Thanks, Jace.
See ya.